To be acting out of order, and your microphone will be muted immediately without warning. Continued violations will result in you being electronically removed from the meeting. Robert's rules will apply for anybody attending the meeting in person. All voting tonight will be done by roll call vote to ensure all votes are properly accounted for. The roll call will be conducted by the township manager. There will be no actions taken on a non-agenda item of a non-emergency, non-urgent nature that arise from the meeting. All such items will be referred to staff and will be handled at a later date. The Hempfield Township public comment rules will apply for all public comment. You must be a resident or visitor of the township to speak. You must identify yourself by name and address before speaking and sign the guest log for meeting minute purposes or follow the chat procedure just discussed. Comment is limited to 3 minutes and must be about the agenda item being discussed, with the exception of public comment at the end of the meeting for non-agenda items. Finally, there will be no action taken during public comment period for non-agenda items, with all issues referred to staff. So now I'd like to start with the first item on our agenda. Please rise for a moment of silence and the pledge. Now the pledge. Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Maybe seated. It's always a mouthful reading those Zoom rules at this point. But it's nice that we are still doing Zoom. Not all municipalities are doing that at this point anymore. So the first item we have on our agenda is the consent agenda. The purpose of the consent agenda is to approve routine items that usually require very little debate or discussion. So with that, I'll open up the door for this consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, reading the report from the chief fire official, I'm seeing that there's consideration being made for radio replacement. And it hasn't been too long that there was countywide, statewide efforts of coordination, major radio replacement efforts. And I'm wondering if it is necessary to redo radios, something to that extent again.
Maybe Chief can address this, but he's also working on it for the police department.
Okay, yeah, please.
The radios that were purchased under that P25 system that the county did was 2014. New radios that the fire department and police department use are essentially little computers. So they've outlived their life expectancy. They're just obsolete in some ways and they're broken. So at least for the police department, which you'll see in my capital budget request, is a considerable amount of money to replace the portable radios. We're working a deal with Motorola and trying to do a group purchase with other county departments. The more radios, the higher bulk will get a discount. We've already worked up to a 7% discount, which for us on my proposal to you that you'll see next month, we're saving $10,000 by going as a group. So I included the fire departments regionally, and that's what John is working on to see if those fire departments, and I think that one of the departments is going to request 6. So sadly, they're about almost $4,000 a piece. So the more radios we get, the bigger discount. So that's what that is. They just need replaced.
So those radios, it was 2014, 7 years. And
Life expectancy is anywhere around 7 years. The Motorola's that I'm proposing that we buy, probably closer to 10-year life expectancy. When we bought the first ones, we bought a lower end radio because everybody needed them. Most county police departments have already replaced them or in the process of replacing it. And I can only imagine that the fire departments are doing the same.
Okay, thank you. While you're up, sir, in your report, there are 17 registration title offenses. And I'm questioning, are people driving vehicles without registration and therefore not having insurance possibly?
Probably.
That's significant to have.
How many was it?
17 incidences.
That's a common violation. Driving with, that would include somebody whose license expired, the registration expired, or the driver's license expired last month, 2 months ago.
Okay.
I wouldn't consider that excessive.
My concern would be the driving without insurance, but
I don't know that from those stats.
yeah, okay.
I could pull that, but I don't, that's not a pervasive problem in the township.
It caught my eye.
I don't know if that, what's category, I don't have my report from me.
I don't exactly remember, I just know it was part of your
It could,
report.
it could also include expired inspection stickers. A lot of people now, because there's no sticker on the license plate, a lot of people aren't getting it and then they don't remember that they need to renew it, which is the push for that coming back at some point. I think that was a mistake by trying to save money that we don't get the sticker for your license plate anymore.
And also on one of my reoccurring concerns of alarms, there's a significant amount of unpaid assessment fees. Are you familiar and know what I'm speaking?
I think as the year goes through, we'll collect most of those. We typically don't have a problem collecting those fees. It just depends on what month the report was done. So they kind of fluctuate on a monthly basis.
Okay.
We don't at this point have any individual businesses or residences that have recurrent false alarms. I think we fixed that with the fine structure the last time that we did it. So check that number again in a month or so, and I think we'll catch up.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. That concludes my.
Anything else on the consent agenda, guys? I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved.
Okay, motion, Mr. Wigglesworth, second, Mr. LaFever. Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Abstain. And I'm abstaining because of one of the bills. Okay, so with that, we have 401 for the consent agenda. Next up, we're gonna move on to the action items. The first action item is development services, and it is advertisement of the zoning ordinance text amendment for conditional use and special exceptions, acknowledged and authorization to send to the Lancaster County Planning Commission, East Hempfield Township Planning Commission, authorization to advertise for adoption considerations. And I will open up the first question, which was, we had to table this last meeting because there were some minor issues. Mr. Becker, Ms. Switzer, could you just illuminate us on the minor issues real quick?
As I said, they were minor typographical errors that I worked out with DMA and ran it by the township solicitor. She gave us clean copy for tonight's meeting, and we're good to go at this point.
Okay. Any questions, discussion on board?
I had 3 notes from my review. One is a group home. My question is, as I read this, it suggests that a group home could be located in any residential area and be able to exist without a license and without inspection. Is that?
That's correct, and under the Federal Fair Housing Act, we cannot treat group homes any different than we treat any other single-family dwelling. Therefore, we cannot require a license, we cannot require special inspections, or any other special hoops that they would have to jump through that would not be that we would not subject a regular single-family dwelling to.
Interesting. Okay. My second item was in reference to salvage or junkyards. And as I read that, if someone has a vehicle with expired registration on their property, that they are considered a salvage yard. And I'm not recalling exactly what that would mean. I know it restricts dismantling and storage of parts and some things like that. But I'm just wondering more about that. What brings this particularly to mind, there is a property on Church Street where there has been an old blue Volkswagen parked for a very long time. It has a cover that's been provided after I had drawn the staff's attention to the matter, but it is still a vehicle that would come under this.
This have to caution you a little bit because we haven't advertised this for a public hearing of a board. And so we gotta be careful having a discussion as a board when we haven't advertised that first. When we're speaking, get ourselves in trouble with the adoption of this ordinance if we get into discussions about it tonight. So I'm just kind of letting the first one go. We gotta really be careful procedurally because there's a process we have to follow for adopting an ordinance and having a discussion with the board before we've advertised it for the board's discussion can get us in trouble. I would encourage you to have that conversation separately with Mr. Beck with any of the concerns you might have at this point, or to bring it up with the planning commission.
Okay. I was hoping to have an ordinance prepared from us after this amount of time that was representing any concerns that the board would have. And
We still have the opportunity on our part to make changes to the ordinance. Nothing that says once we start the public hearing that we can't make changes to the ordinance, and that's perfectly fine and acceptable. Plus, there could be changes that come to the planning commission review process stuff. It's just we cannot talk about something we've not advertised when it comes to an ordinance.
very well.
So really, this is about advertisement. So is there any other discussions at this point?
The only comment I make is there any reason to not have a clean ordinance, copy of the ordinance without the strikeouts?
That this is the actual document that will be sent to E-code for codification. Those strikeouts are to signify what is to be removed from the current codified ordinance. And as part of the packet, there should be DMA's their supplemental, which is basically the ordinance without those strike-throughs, Mr. Beck.
That was not in my packet. I mean, I got, the only thing in the packet was the. Oh, wait a minute.
I don't think I saw it.
I apologize, there's a struck through as well, but there's some highlights in there as far as some changes. But as far as for procedure's sake, the strike throughs are there to signify to E-code when it is codified that those sections of the ordinance are removed.
I like it better that way. Makes it clear what's being changed.
Any other discussion for advertising this tonight? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to, read the motion here. Motion is to authorize the submitting to zoning ordinance text amendment to Lancaster County Planning Commission, Hempfield Township Planning Commission for review and recommendation to authorize advertising the zoning ordinance text amendment for adoption consideration. So do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Motion for Mr. Wigglesworth, do I hear a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Weaver, Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Next up, we have TLK Partners Incorporated Sketch Plan Land Development Waiver, 200 Running Pump Road, approve the request of waiver of land development requirements. Mr. Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For you gentlemen tonight is the request to waive land development for a project at 200 Running Pump Road. The project consists of adding 2 padel courts or padel ball courts. The proposed courts will be less than 5,000 square feet of new impervious surface onto the property, which would fall within the small project category and not require a stormwater management plan. The project does not require any new road improvements. The property is currently served by the Racquetball Club West, which is a members club to play racquetball, tennis, and future padel ball. At this point, the applicant's already been to the zoning hearing board and received a special exception to expand the non-conforming use. They were just at the September Planning Commission meeting. Planning Commission reviewed the proposal of the sketch plan and recommended approval of the land development waiver. And at this point in time, due to the project scope, staff is also recommending that the board respectfully consider the waiver of land development for this project.
Is there anybody, are you with the group, do you have anything you to add additional?
Yeah, good evening. My name is Craig Deal. I'm counsel
I
for.
could have you stand.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Because of Zoom, no one will hear you, that's online.
Good evening. My name is Craig Deal and I'm counsel for TLK Partners Incorporated. I believe what Mr. Beck summarized is accurate. We're here to answer any questions that the board may have to assist you in your decision making.
Okay, we'll open up to the board for some questions. And my only question is that pickleball courts that you're putting in? They seem to be in high demand right now in our township, so.
No, and that's quite different from pickleball. As we discussed before, the planning commission asked the same question. It's a smaller tennis racket type racket, and it's a dead ball, so there is no noise, like a pickleball, which is a clacking sound. And all the sound is kind of self-contained within the cubicle for the construction of the courts.
Okay.
It's a new sport from Spain, or from Europe. It's just coming to the United States, so very popular in Europe. It's a mix between, I would say, racquetball, squash, and tennis. Mr. Zink's here, who is the owner of the club.
Any
Well, it's
questions?
been a great asset to East Hempfield over the years, and my only question was, I thought I read that there was a stormwater concern by the applicant, and this does not anywhere near approach the 70% clear areas and, okay, good.
The only question I have has to do with the game itself, the structure that you're gonna be putting in place, are you putting in adjacent to your current tennis courts?
Yes, I believe what is shown on the screen does not, I can't tell if that reflects the tennis courts to the far left bottom of that diagram, but it is. There's 8 outdoor archery tennis courts that are currently being used, and they are going to be located right beside them.
Beside, okay, good. Great, great.
And it's sufficient setbacks from Running Pump Road.
Awesome.
No issues there, and there's a pretty large hedge already there in the back for the neighbors. Okay.
Any other discussion of the board? Anybody from the audience? No one from the audience? Okay, well, then we have an action item here. And I'll read the motion. Motions to approve the land development waiver for TLK Partners Incorporated project at 200 Running Pump Road Township, file number 21-23.01 as presented, subject to the applicant providing a fee in lieu of contribution equivalent to the land development plan application fee for both preliminary plan and final plan. So, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion for Mr. Bennett. Do I hear a second? Second for Mr. Wigglesworth. Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing your project get built.
Thank you.
And down the road, if you ever want to add a pickleball court, I can tell you that that would be something that's in high demand right down our township too, so.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, John.
Okay, next up, we have Windmere Lane dedication, adopt resolution 2021-40, the acceptance of the deed and dedication and approve the road maintenance guarantee. Ms. Switzer.
I will turn that one over to John.
Mr. Becker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you, City. Before you gentlemen tonight is action to accept dedication of Windermere Lane, the new portion as part of Lime Spring Village. With that, it's adoption of resolution 2021-40. And that is to accept dedication of Windermere Lane, or the new portion of Windermere Lane, the acceptance of the deed of dedication, the road maintenance agreement, and to establish $50,902.98 as the road maintenance guarantee. Perry and Scott Hayden are on Zoom. They both did do their inspections. Everything's good to go from their standpoint. We did have an issue where the raised pedestrian crossing is not yet installed. That should be installed at the beginning of October, but we do hold financial security for that. So as far as on dedication of Windermere Lane, we didn't see any issues since we're already holding financial security for that improvement. And never mind, Cindy just corrected me, and it is installed at this point. So with that being said, there are no issues that staff has at this point, and is respectfully requesting the board act on the resolution, deed of dedication, and the road maintenance agreement, and the road financial security.
Any discussion on the board? Very routine thing. Anybody from the audience? Nothing from Zoom, okay. So I'll read the motion. The motion is to adopt resolution 2021-40 to approve the deed of dedication and to approve the road maintenance agreement and establish a $50,902.98 as the road maintenance guarantee for Windmere Lane. So do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion for Mr. Weaver. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Bennett. Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Okay, next up, we have the Hempfield Foundation 5K Run Walk and half-mile kid run on October 2nd. I guess Mrs. Switzer will be playing Mrs. Barber right now.
Right.
Okay.
They submitted a special event permit for this run, which is on October 2nd. There are several intersections that are involved. And what I'd like to do, if you approve this, is to modify your suggested motion to include a condition that they resolve all traffic issues at the intersections on the roadways. That still has yet to be worked out. This is the first time they've run this event.
What was that, resolve all issues?
Resolve all traffic control related issues concerning the event.
So are they aware of what they need to do?
Yes, they've been contacting constables, are waiting to feedback from Hempfield Fire or Fire Police. And then at the police department will be the last resource. But there's a charge for that, so they want to kind of avoid that and try for the Hempfield Fire Police.
Okay, discussion on the board here at this point. Seeing none, is there anybody from the audience? Okay, seeing none. So the motion, I'll read, the motion is to approve the Hempfield Foundation application to utilize the identified roadways for a sprint 5K walk and half-mile kids run on Saturday, October 2nd, 2021, and to authorize the chairman or vice chairman to sign the roadway indemnification form for identified roadways as specified in the application, conditioned upon resolution of all traffic control related issues to its satisfaction.
So moved.
Okay, motion from Mr. LaFever, do I hear a second? Second from the chair, Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, ayes have it, 5-0. Okay,
From the 7-Eleven, that will be challenging for a large truck coming up a grade, not having a yielding or motion lane at their disposal. There's some things there that I think are going to take some additional adjustment. And just want to make sure that that's kept in our vision.
So Mr. LaFever, I did go out and took a look at it myself, and I know exactly what you're talking about, those white arrows. Do we know, Cindy or John, does PennDOT require them to be both directions like that for that turn lane? Because it's, basically indicating that they would turn off the ledge into the Kellogg's area, or like Mr. LaFever said, go up to the on-ramp. So if they're not needed, it would probably make sense for them to be removed.
Yeah, I made a request to Jason Bewley at PennDOT District 8. And I've asked TPD to help me try and get a copy of the PennDOT plans. And hopefully once we get a copy of those plans, it'll help to clarify that issue. But we are working on trying to get any of these issues resolved.
the issue you're gonna have is it's a center turn lane. And the center turn lane has nowhere to turn to the other side. And that doesn't think outside the box. There's only one type of striping for a center turn lane, which is the dual arrows that you see on there right
So
now.
they require it, even though that makes sense.
So, we'll see how Jason Bewley, the traffic engineer for PennDOT, responds, but that is actually correctly striped for a center turn lane, even though there's no thing to turn towards the Kellogg's side of the plan for.
So will you be having a conversation with him, or will this be through email correspondence and the engineer?
Right now it's been email, working with TPD, and the next step is to try and get Chris Bauer involved to see if he has any pull to try and get the plans and some discussions with PennDOT.
Who was the engineer for that? Wasn't it McCormick Taylor that did that? Can't we just reach out to McCormick Taylor and ask for the plans? I mean, we paid for the preliminary design anyways.
I think we can reach out to Stephanie, she probably can give it to us, or my comment.
Yeah, McCormick Taylor is the one that designed the state road interchange, so
Yes.
we got the contacts, we paid for half the design, we should be able to get a copy of the plans we paid for.
Yep, okay.
Okay, anything else from Mr. Beck? Okay, we will now move on to manager report, Ms. Switzer.
So Centerville Road, again, moving along, it's a little project, but it is making headway. We're down to one property right away that we have to finalize, which is tremendous.
No, at this point, any talk about changing the let dates, it's kind of no more sliding back further.
Apparently not, no.
Okay,
The only thing that might hold that up would be utility coordination, but I haven't heard any conflicts, so I think that's pretty much handled.
okay.
So it looks like we're on a clear path there. So that project could be happening next year, spring of next year. Church Street paving, also a lead date of 1/27/22. We have meetings with the school district, the water sewer utilities. I'm still trying to fine tune what exactly their schedule is, because they're a little vague in how that's going to be handled. So hopefully by the next meeting, I'll have more clarity on that. They're kind of getting their ducks in a row in terms of how much time it's gonna take for each part of their project. Old Morristown Road, I'm still waiting for feedback from Corey Taylor regarding an update. Things seem to be progressing along. I know that Corey Taylor asked for information from PennDOT. PennDOT has not gotten back, which is probably why Corey Taylor has not gotten back to me. Farmingdale Road, there again, we have one right away that we're still working to finalize, which should be happening shortly. You see the funding levels there. That project will be let in the spring.
So for that one, we're gonna need to juggle how we utilize the grant monies. Because we talked about those, we want to have as much of the high money left over, because that could be used as seed money, where the grant monies have some strings attached. But the grant monies have to go to the Farmingdale Road projects, but we're gonna have money left over.
Yes.
And so what we need to do is have a plan to make sure that we spend all the grant money and we maximize the amount of our own money that doesn't get spent, so that we can use it for other things along Good Drive.
Gotcha.
And we're probably gonna need to bring up another project that would qualify for that grant. So I'm just throwing an idea out there, would be the signalization of Spring Valley and Good Drive that we've had in the books for a long time right now. So that possibly could be something, I don't know if we can or can't do that, I don't know if the numbers work or not, but we're gonna need to do something. Because we will not be able to spend, our project will not spend all the grant money that we got for the Farmingdale Road project stuff as the matching month.
Oh, you don't think so?
Nope.
Okay,
So we're gonna have money left over for the grant,
okay,
and it has to be utilized within a very short period of time. So we need to have another project along Good Drive that's kind of ready to go, that we can put the remaining grant funds to, so that we don't turn that money back. So it'd be a shame to send back to the state $200,000.
don't want to do that.
So the issue is, we have, I think it was a 30% match or something along those lines.
I think it's 30. Those
So
are-
if, let's just say hypothetically, it's that the Farmingdale Road project was $1 million, and we got just over $1 million, we got $1.1 million. And so $750,000 of that grant money can go towards the project, because the other 30% has to come from the township with our matching funds, which is the high dollars. That means we're still gonna have about $300,000 of grant money that we have to put to something. A signal cost is around $250,000. So it just seems like it would be a good potential use, but I think someone needs to go through the estimates and pull out and see, okay, how much money we're gonna have left over for the grant money, and where else on Good Drive can we put that money?
We'll use it for this senior citizen pedestrian crossing. We just approved.
That whole 3100?
Well, that's just gonna be the engineering study, isn't it?
All that is the timing, there's no construction cost. So that's why that's a cheap option, there's no hardwire or anything, just changing the timing.
Okay, well, that's peanut, but it's peanut.
So I'm thinking, I'm not sure, I'm just on rough back of the napkin math as I was looking at this. I had not seen the grant application, I don't know what our matching requirements are, but I just know that because of the matching requirements, we're not gonna spend all the grant money that we put in for the project that we've now got. So we have to have other projects along Good Drive that are ready to go.
Okay.
Or we're gonna be returning that money to the state.
So the Railroad Bridge project we discussed tonight, there's nothing to report there, we're just kind of making all the submittals that we can for that grant money, and that's a 5-year in the future project, that's nothing that's gonna happen soon. In terms of group reports, the Park and Rec group met, they talked to the neighbors about pickleball courts, there's still some concern there. We have the neighbors as well as the people playing pickleball, tracking how many people, how many times the people are playing, so we have some sort of information. In addition to, better understanding the use of those courts, that also can be used if we do some potential grants to DCNR, to build courts. The admin finance group met on 9/2, we discussed the MMO information. We also had a presentation from the library representatives regarding their activities and their future initiatives. We also had a discussion about the ARPA funding that the township has recently has since gotten half of that money, the other half is coming next year. You'll note there that we have a request from LASA, Hempfield Water, and Hart for some funds. We also provided that group with a list of priorities for stormwater projects. The admin finance group has asked everybody to think outside the box in terms of the ARP funds and potentially look at those for projects that we would probably not consider. One of those was, a great example was a park at Dover Park. That's a park that's used quite heavily as access to Farmingdale trails. So that's potential, but we're open to ideas. Public Works met, they discussed the traffic changes that Mr. Lefebvre mentioned on Shank Road, the concerns of the resident. We also had another concern brought before us concerning brake retarder, a J brake ordinance. There is difficulty there in creating such an ordinance because of the enforcement issues and the criteria that needs to be followed to provide enforcement. So that's being further explored before we go any further with that. We also discussed the potential from a developer on the north side of Spokane Road that received 1.4 million in transportation grants for a project that he was proposing on Spokane Road. He has since abandoned that project and the property is for sale. So that means the grant money is sitting waiting to be used. And he has approached the township to see if there's any interest in transferring those grants to the township. We are further exploring that with him. And we probably come back to you with some sort of offer in the future. There might be some strings attached to that, so we have to further explore that. The only other thing I have is I'd like to request an executive session tonight to discuss a personnel issue. Unless you have any question, that concludes my report.
Okay, any questions for the manager?
Couple of questions from here. On the J break ordinance or potential ordinance. Do we have to have an ordinance that we enforce? Or that has an enforcement component to it? It would seem to me that there is some value in some signage. I'm thinking off the top of my head, I'm not sure how I word it. But some signage out there that we like J breaks not to be used, prefer truckers not using it. Are we gonna get everybody to comply with that? No, but we would get some compliance. In addition to that, it would show the community that we're responding to their requests. So I guess my question in a nutshell initially is, if we come up with some kind of rules, does there need to be an enforcement component to it? I mean, we have signs out there, other types of signs out in the community and on the roads that, where there's really no enforcement. Children area, deer, I can think of those two, deer crossing.
Is it something we can refer to public safety in that discussion?
Sure, yeah. I just think.
I could tell what we talked about in Public Works, and the issue is going to be the individual that made the request is not just expecting voluntary, he's expecting a police officer out there enforcing it. And so, and what happens with these Jake break ordinances is unless a police officer happens to be there sitting in a car when a driver applies it, there's no way to catch and convict somebody at that. And the police departments just in general just do not want to have access to something important, and I know that's not what you're asking about, but they don't want to have something on the books that they simply can't enforce. We did reach out to some of the municipalities, we had Ms. Schweitzer reach out to some of the other municipalities, if you want to go over that.
We did reach out to West Hempfield, we reached out to, I think West Lampeter, Denver Borough, Effort Borough. They all have the ordinances in place. West Hempfield has just 2 streets, but everybody else has the entire area. And they've never issued a citation that they can find. The Denver Effort Borough suggested that the signs alone are enough to deter drivers from using their brakes because they're CDL drivers, so if they get a violation, it's against their record. But there is concern that if the signs are there, the police will get phone calls, and essentially it's not enforceable, because even if they do apply the brakes, they could be applying the brakes simply because of a squirrel coming across the road, and they apply the brakes, and their air brakes are already engaged.
You know, as a resident, I hear them every day on their Avenue, every day. Many times a day, and I just a lot of noise that we don't need. But so, something, like you said, something in public safety maybe you could take a look at. On the pickleball, the rec commission did meet with our neighbors, and one of the other things that we're talking about, and I don't think we need to get into a long discussion about it, but I'd like to get a sense of whether or not the board would be okay with using the tennis courts. Striping the tennis courts either with paint or with tape, and have them utilized for pickleball. It seems to me, and again, we're doing some of our research on this, that when the pickleball people are there, it is in the morning, when the tennis courts generally are not being used for anything. And it just might be an option. So I guess I would ask if there's anyone here that would be absolutely opposed to that. Let Andy and I know that before we move down that road.
For me, I am just on the sense that they live next to a park. And while I want to be sympathetic, they have not been a good neighbor with the group that we're talking about. There's been constant back and forth and egging them on with loud music and what have you and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is they live next to a park, and the park is going to be used. And what if it's the basketball next? You know, what if that's too noisy? Then what do we do? And what if it's people walking by their house on the trail and that's too much for them? I mean, at what point do we say, look, you're not going to control the park?
Well, you make a good point. You know, I would also say that this is a medical condition that's developed based on that activity in the park. This isn't just a desire or a wish, or it's an actual medical mental illness that's developed here. And I just think, you know, again, I hear what you're saying. I don't disagree. I'm gonna put you in the camp of you'd rather not use the test.
I hate to do this to you, but I would actually suggest another thing too. I'm not in favor of restriping the tennis courts. I've walked a couple of times a week right now at at the park, and those tennis courts are actually used relatively a lot, at the same time pickleball's in operation. I've also sat down at the seat right back behind the pickleball courts and listened to it, and I don't really have any issues, and we also received complaints from that homeowner about the basketball courts now too, so it's not just,
We did.
not just pickleball at this point. So I'll throw out actually something that I was thinking about, because every time I walked around it, I've seen the tennis courts in operation. Rarely do I actually see the basketball court occupied at the same time as the pickleball courts. And this just added a little stress level is realistically, we already got 2 pickleball courts. There's something to be said to flex a 3rd pickleball court at our basketball court area right next to the other 2. And keeps them all together where all their equipment is. And it just seems like that would be, because they're asking for additional courts, they need more than 2 courts now. Just happened to run into the president yesterday and fill his brain, so I got my ear bent for about half an hour from the group. And they're looking at, they need 3-4 courts in the township, and they're asking about the status of the grant, and I said, well, it's a grant, it's not guaranteed we're gonna get anything for a grant. But I would be in favor of actually restriping the basketball court, making it multi-purpose, so they can still play basketball. And then you could put the pickleball courts up, and the tennis courts, you have netting, where the pickleball courts, you hit the net, comes up and comes down, so it's actually a lot easier to utilize the tennis court and put a 3rd court in there than to do anything with our tennis courts. And our tennis courts do get a pretty good use, at least from when the times I walk around when baseball practice is going on, which also, like I said, I've sat down and my son's baseball practice and watched the pickleball group play, so that's my position. I wouldn't really support us taking the nets down for a pickleball court. And I think there's gonna be a lot of, it's not, like I said, they can put, the pickleball nets are very mobile, but our nets, you gotta drop them. It's not something where you can just switch one to the other real easily at this point. So I wouldn't support us doing that to our tennis courts.
I was under the impression that the tennis court left as a tennis court and the pickleball would be, you can put 2 pickleball courts on 1 tennis court, so I don't, you actually have to take the tennis net down. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so that was one thing, Mr. Bennett did have what I thought, first I wasn't sure it would help, but then the more I thought about it, he asked them to kind of keep a log of when the pickleball players are there, because they said now it's morning, afternoon, and evening, and there's 3 groups. So I think in the afternoons, it's just a family or 2 that might come into play, so obviously that's not gonna be as big of an issue. But to keep track of when it happens, when there are players, and roughly how many. I think our staff was gonna kind of keep an eye on the tennis courts a little bit. And just once we get a feel for when pickleball's going on and when tennis, that possibly there might be some overlap with tennis courts. Though it sounds like you're seeing that may not work, so.
Like I said, I'll speak for evening hours when baseball practice and Saturday mornings when baseball games are going on. Both courts are being used simultaneously. I won't speak through Monday through Friday during the day parts, but in the evening and in Saturday mornings, all the tennis courts are gone and the pickleball courts are both up in operation at the exact same time. And then the president from the group that's been here before mentioned there's now a second organized group that also does pickleball too, and so that would match what you're saying here.
And we are talking about doing this in the morning when the tennis courts are not being used.
If that's the case.
If that's the case, we don't know that for sure. So we'll get some more information on that. But I just wanted to put that out there again because.
Right, and they did bring up the point that we moved the courts from where they were as far away as we could get them. We kind of told them that was the first step, so now they're looking for what's the next step, so that was kind of
How about there is no next step?
something we maybe kind of put ourselves into, but
So
there will be more.
Two,
They're not, they commented on basketball. This isn't a basketball issue. This is she, as I said, she has a mental illness caused by this repetitional sound. It's a health issue for her. She's not, this isn't, like I said, it's not it is a complaint, but it's not, it isn't just somebody complaining about too much noise. You've always been. That's one.
Anything else? Okay. Move on to public comment. Is there any public comment? We only have one person in the public at this point left.
Nope, no public comment.
Okay, so seeing no public comment, anything for the good of the board before we get to executive session? Okay, seeing none, it is now on the clock, 8:37. We are going to go into executive session to talk about a personnel matter, and we will not return. So with that, we're adjourning the meeting. Thank